Hello and good afternoon, and a warm welcome to the viewers on this Facebook Live as we come to you today with the Puppy Centre with Petplan. Now, this is my first live behaviour or pet behaviour Q&A, but the subject of puppies is one that has always sat close to my heart, not just because everybody loves a puppy, but because it is that age where we can look at the beginnings and the foundations of a dog's behaviour. Because when we get the foundations right from the beginning and to hopefully avoid some of the common pitfalls, it very much means that you're less likely to have dog behaviour problems at a later stage. You know, most dogs I see, the average age is about 2. And if I get the opportunity to meet a dog when it's much younger, well, we're really looking at prevention rather than cure. So I know my trusty helper Kim has some questions for me, and if you have questions as we go through the morning or afternoon rather, please throw them in. Also, if you would be kind enough to like and share the feed, I would be very grateful, and that would help the internet Facebook juices flow between Petplan and yourselves. So fire away, Kim, what do we have?
Okay, the first question is from Nicola. Hi, my 6-month-old puppy has recently started weeing when he sees me. He then appears to lie in the wee, almost in a submissive way. How can I stop this?
Okay, so yes, what you're describing does sound to be what we could term as submissive urination. So puppies, by their very nature, have very small bladders, and their bladder control when they're very young is not as good as it is as a junior dog or an adult dog. So the essence of the problem is that, or it's not so much a problem, but what's happening is that the dog has a full bladder, it's excitable, it relieves its bladder in the process of being excited, and then you have some urine on the floor. Now, very often dogs will automatically, regardless of whether they have weed or not, will lie on the floor and show their bellies to you, which is a further submissive action. So this is why your dog is lying in its own pee, basically. Now, interestingly, my first dog, Amber, a wire-haired Vizsla, she had exactly the same issue, but long story short, she grew out of it. And most dogs will grow out of it. I think it's fair to say that it's most commonly females that will do this behaviour or are prone to it, okay? So my tips to you in terms of how you can hope to begin to stop it are to remember to be patient, and that your dog will very likely grow out of it. Secondly, and this is really important in terms of what you do and how you respond to it when it happens, is to not to make a big deal of it. If you, I would ignore it. If it happens, I would not say anything, because that is likely to cause further anxiety for the pup. Even young dogs are quite aware of what they're doing, and so if you're marking this unwanted set of events either negatively or positively, and I wouldn't do either, then that it could cause further stress for the dog. In terms of also how you're managing yourself when you interact with the dog, is to make your interactions and greetings with the pup calm. If you're very excitable and you're sort of wriggling up the dog and fluffing the dog up like this and using high-pitched voices, then it's a guarantee, in your situation especially, to make your dog pee herself at your feet. So it needs to be thought about where you go up to your dog, that you are loving and engaging with your dog, but to make those engagements calm. Now, I'm a great fan of getting dogs to sit when or just before we interact with them, or when we're interacting with them, and especially with a puppy, because if we do that from early stages, then we're very much in the prevention rather than cure mode, which I am a great fan of. So what you'll be doing is asking your puppy to sit for you. This could be pretending I'm stood up. You could be stood up here, you're waiting for you're asking for your dog to sit, rather than you coming into your dog straight away and having the big excitable greeting. Because what we're thinking about here is how to have calmer greetings in the future so that we stop this submissive urination. Okay, so wait for your dog to sit. Once your dog's sitting, then you can lean in immediately to your dog. Put a collar on the dog, because this then allows you to have a thumb just down the side of the collar, and you can gently hold and control the pup a little bit. You can address any jumping up by just having the dog gently here. It's not a vice grip, just a little grip, and then this hand can be the affection giving hand, okay? So that we're showing the dog how to say hello, and we're showing the dog what type of sort of mindset and that we want from the dog when we are going to start greeting and interacting with him or her. Okay, so I hope that helps. It's really a case of bit of control, calm greetings, any accidents, ignore them, possibly put the dog outside so it can have a proper wee, and then clean it up with the dog out of the way, put everything back to as it was, and then carry on and be a little bit more mindful of this in terms of how you're greeting the dog in the future. Just one little further add-on, think also about how other people are interacting and saying hello to the dog, because it isn't all just about you, the question asker's interactions is about other members of the family. So, you know, mum, dad, kids, people coming over. Have a lead on the puppy to stop the puppy getting too excitable, and that you can encourage the pup to be in the sit position. So if somebody is coming into me to greet my puppy and the pup is facing this way, I would then maybe have a little finger behind the collar in this angle, and then have the dog in the sit position, and just do your best to begin to encourage the dog to be in the sit when it receives calm affection from your visitor. Okay, so hope that helps. That's a lovely opening question. What else do we have, Kim?
Okay, we've got my puppy has had its final injections and will shortly be going for its first walk. How can I start training her on the lead and encourage her not to pull, as I imagine everything will be very exciting for her?
Good. Well, everything really will be exciting. Just imagine from your puppy's point of view the absolute and complete difference from knowing your garden and your home to going out into a park for its first time, or even thinking down the line onto beaches, and mind-blowing experiences for your puppy. So yes, it will be a big difference, and you're quite right to think about how to get your dog to accept the lead nicely. And I would just tag on at the end later on some thoughts about how we evolve from a short lead, because we don't want to keep a dog on a short lead for all of their lives. And I said, you'd think, well, who would do that? But actually many people do keep their dogs on short leads because they don't trust them to come back. But let's come back to your specific question. So there are three basic ways or areas that you can evolve the use of a lead and a collar. And by three, I mean in the home, where it's really quiet and minimal distractions, then in the garden, and then out in public. So those are the three stages that I would suggest that you set yourself to work through. And obviously the home is easy, garden intermediate, and potentially big public spaces are more complicated and more of a challenge. So what we're really looking at is to introduce the lead. I'm not entirely sure what stage you're at, but I'll sort of assume, I think that we need to start from the beginning. But that simply means building up, placing the collar on and off the dog. You can literally place it around the dog's neck without buckling or clipping it. Take it off, bit of food, and just build that up. Don't stress the dog by sort of grappling with the pup, putting the collar on. Obviously once it's on, it won't be able to get it off, but some dogs theoretically could find that stressful. So just build it up, a couple of days, 3 days, there's no big rush. What's likely to be more of a challenge for your pup is having a lead on it, because this sense of being restricted, because if you're holding the lead, the dog is restricted, can also be somewhat stressful for a little dog on its first time. So again, what we can do is to have the dog, say, in the home with you, in the lounge, on the floor, sitting down. You could have some high value treats in your possession that the dog can't steal, and you could introduce the lead. Let the dog look at it, sniff it, listen to the little clip sound it makes with that spring in its catch, which many dog leads will make. You could just play around without letting the dog get into a tug game with the lead, but with the lead in the dog's presence. Moving on from that, most dogs won't have a problem with that, is that you could then place the lead on the collar, take it off, feed the dog, put it on, feed the dog, take it off, and just, there's no real definitive way to do it, but just make it a sort of an organic process whereby you think that you're not pushing the pup unduly, but you can see that the pup is having a new experience. You will be able to tell that. And then you can let the dog drag the lead around the room, okay? And you may distract the dog with another little ropey toy. So it's not about the lead, really. The lead isn't the issue. We're having fun when the lead goes on. So fun would be little play games with your pup, use of small treats as and where you see appropriate, and that you're keeping it all nice and relaxed in a positive voice, okay? Once you've addressed that stage, you can then think about holding the lead and having the dog, if I was sitting on the floor, having the dog sitting in front of you, you could treat the dog and that the lead would be running from your hand to the dog, and that the dog's aware that the lead is on. Once that stage is good, you could then move around the room a little, encouraging the dog, using encouraging voices. Any jumping up, which can happen as soon as you put a lead on and you're stood up and the dog's on the floor, just stop still, stay still, wait for the dog to settle, because jumping is usually at this age overexcitement. Just stop, be calm. Once the dog's sitting down, lean in, quick treat, good boy, and we can move on again. So just try to be natural about it and don't force anything. And then we would hope that the pup is following you nicely around a room. You know, naturally I'm fast forwarding the process, but this is roughly how I would go about it. Once you're happy that the dog will stop and sit for you and interact with you nicely, and it isn't jumping up in, say, the quietness of your home, then you could take the dog out into the garden and repeat the process. All right? But that, I would hope, would be a next step. So you don't necessarily have to go back to what you were doing in the home, although it wouldn't hurt. But I would look at then about doing the same. So you're doing little circuits around the garden, maybe little figure of eights. Very young dogs are capable of this, even if they're just not doing it because they're trained, but they're doing it because they're chasing you for a bit of chicken. You know, that's what training is. It's just repetition, or rather the introduction of an idea and then the repetition, where the dog finds it fun and enjoyable. Once you then feel that you've got some nice control in the garden, you can then try your hand in a quiet area of a public space, where it's, you know, you've got the trees blowing and the birds and maybe other people and dogs and children off at a distance. So you're just having short positive sessions with your pup, and that applies to virtually everything, short positive sessions, and then quitting whilst you're ahead. That's how I would introduce the lead. Most pups, to be fair, you can just go, come here, collar on, click, lead on, click, and you are likely to be fine. But I think it's always far preferable to be a little bit more measured, to think ahead of some of the, what's the best word, you know, the objections your pup might have to a lead. You would think, well, it's pretty innocuous, but I have seen dogs, some young dogs get quite stressed with leads on. So build it up gradually, and then once you've got the puppy following you, you can also, that's the benefit of doing figure of eights and oval shapes in the garden, is that you can apply that to the streets as well. Okay, but the main thing is to keep, when it's on a short lead, is to keep that dog's attention on you, and not to also indulge allowing your pup to scatter everywhere when on the pavement, for example. It will take time for your puppy to settle down, but try to start from the beginning, in the sense that this is how we want to be. So you're not allowing the puppy to drag you up to wheelie bins and fence posts and telegraph poles. You are, even at that stage, beginning to show the dog how to behave in certain areas. Quick final point, when in the street, I have two gears that I often suggest to people, because when the dog is on a short lead on the pavement, we want the dog, we're not doing competition obedience, but we want the dog loosely by our side rather than to be behind you and left and right and all over the shop. But then the dog can be a dog when you get to the fields, and that's when we would put a long training line on the dog, 15, 30, 50 feet, depending on the dog and the breed and its activities, and then we can work at the recall, as I was talking about earlier. So with puppies, don't please just walk into a field and think, a field, it's the first time, and then let the dog loose. Because you don't, by definition of the dog being very young, really have a good recall in place. And when you call your dog and he or she learns that he can ignore you, what ability do you have to get that puppy back? Well, you don't really. So use a long line, use that for a 2-3 month period in public spaces, in big open parks, say, and work the recall. Different subject altogether, but that's the gist. And then you can take the line off your dog when you're confident that he or she comes back readily, happily, sits at your feet and is really interacting with you. That is, in terms of the recall in public spaces, that's that whole sort of setting the dog up for success and not giving the opportunity for the dog to learn that it can ignore you, because that is not what we want with a young dog. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you for that. What do we have, Kim?
Okay, well, we've got a 7-month-old lab puppy who's recently started chewing everything, including the plasterboard on some of our walls and chair legs. How can I stop this behaviour?
Puppies love to chew, and they have various teething phases. You may well be experiencing what is sometimes known as a secondary teething phase, so the bedding in of more adult teeth. But in any event, it may or may not be that your dog is likely to enjoy chewing, and it's as really a case of what your dog is chewing, because chewing in itself is a natural behaviour, and so with your young dog we want to channel that behaviour and that drive in the dog into something which is acceptable and desirable from your point of view. So how do we stop it, really? How do we manage the dog adequately so it's not a problem and the dog has a high impact in a negative sense on your home? Because most people have homes that they like to keep in a nice way, and a dog can cause hundreds, if not actually thousands of pounds of damage if they're not adequately supervised, because supervision is the key word here. So to expand on the word supervision, please don't leave your dog for any period of time whereby somebody might be able to appear and say, where's your puppy, what's it doing? And even in a very short space of time, for example, on your part maybe a loo break, or you go upstairs to get ready in the morning, if that young dog is loose in your home, that dog could cause mayhem within a matter of minutes. So this is where supervision comes in. If you can't be if you're unable to directly supervise your dog, then I would hope for your sake that you have somewhere to put the dog. So most people would have either a crate that they've been using, and a crate is ongoing use of the crate rather is a good reason for you to maintain it, because chewing may be a bit of a hangover. So your dog may be clean and dry in the home because that's a classic use of the crate, but is the dog maybe still chewing when you need to go out? So the crate would prevent that, provided you use the crate in a sensible way, so you're not using it too long, too often, and that you're not sort of being, how can I put it, lazy and letting the crate do the management for you. So if you need to turn your back on your pup for a moderately short period of time, in the crate, I would say, the dog could have things put in the crate with it to, especially when they get a little older, to help distract and keep it busy. So hollow rubber stuffing toys, or maybe something that's safe to leave your dog with in the crate, but if it can work for a part of its food, that can be quite a smart idea. So that supervision is absolutely key. Where's your pup? What's it doing? Because most problems, whether they're toilet training problems or damage to the home, are because the dog was left to its own devices for too long. Because naturally, if you saw your dog beginning to chew something that it shouldn't, then you would most likely interrupt that and redirect the dog on something a bit more positive. Yeah, so I think the key word is supervision. Giving the dog something to chew on rather than thinking, well, you shouldn't be chewing at all. It's a natural behaviour. Accept that your dog wants to chew. Another area that, or rather reason your dog may be chewing, is that even with young dogs, I think you said the dog was about 7 months or something.
Yes.
You see, even a 7-month-old dog can have lots and lots of energy. So is the dog being given, and this is only a question, but it's often comes up that young dogs are not being given adequate exercise. We need, of course, with a young dog to ensure that they're not being over-exercised, and we should primarily avoid any sort of hard, fast, repetitive games like ball flinging, lots of repetitive stuff where the dog is running full pelt, stopping, jarring, twisting, coming back on itself. That, with a dog under a year, 18 months, can be a bit heavy going on its joints. But allowing a young dog to just what I call mooch about, to sniff, to follow its nose, albeit with you working those recalls, is a very nice way of allowing the dog's natural energy to just expend itself over each daily walk. So it's just a little question for you. Is the dog getting enough exercise, especially with a large, potentially powerful breed like the Labrador? So I hope that helps. Thank you for that.
Okay. We're about to buy a new spaniel puppy, but I have young children too. I'm nervous about introducing them to one another, as I don't want the puppy to bite the children when he starts teething. What's the best way to introduce them to one another to ensure that the puppy doesn't get too excited?
Okay. Well, you know what comes to mind again is that word supervision. Because I went on a behaviour visit recently, and we've just coming to the end of the school summer holidays, of course, so there's lots of children at home with dogs of all ages, but this particular dog was about 18 months. Lovely dog, lovely family, but the dog was being left, and I'm sorry, I'm leapfrogging ahead a little, but the dog was being left with the children, and so what we effectively end up with is a dog which in some respects is like a perpetual child with 2 children, and the dog was being wound up, and they were playing too roughly together, child to dog and dog to children, and the dog was nipping the children, not in a nasty way, but just what, let's call it, excessive behaviour. So we resolved that quite easily by just upping the supervision level of where's the dog, what's it doing, and that would very much, so it's a bit of down the line thinking for you, but that is always a question to ask yourself with children, because of course we have children of very, very young ages, and then slightly older children where they're more mature, and but you know, kids can be kids, and young dogs will be dogs, so they need to be supervised together. Your question, though, to be fair, was a little bit more about how to make the introductions. So the introductions, in short, should be calm and controlled. Okay, those 2 words together mean so much across the dog behaviour, you know, the gamut of behaviours that we can see in our canine friends of any age. Do we have control? Is the dog calm? And when the answer might be no to either of those, then we can have problems in any area. So obviously when kids get new puppies, I've been in that position as a dad in years gone by, it is very exciting. It's exciting enough for the adults. So we need to ensure that the puppy is not being overexcited by the children. When we have overexcitability from any human to any dog, there can result in excessive behaviours. And so we need to ensure that we're not creating too much excitement in the dog, because dogs can, some more than others, but dogs can easily go off the scale in terms of excitement, and then they become nippy, grabby, potentially a bit hard-mouthed, and can start to leave scratches and bruises and tears with children, and even with parents when things get a bit far down the line and they feel that they're losing control. So it's a case, yet again, of avoiding letting the dog become too excitable. Try to set some standards with the children from the outset. Maybe sit down with the children even prior to puppy coming and thinking about, get them involved and talk about puppy behaviour, because it's not just about where they do their business in the garden or who walks or who feeds the dogs. All of those things are important, but we also need to think about how we're going to stimulate the dog, how to play with the dog, and what we might do if the dog becomes mouthy or grabby, because that is extremely common, so thinking about that a little bit in advance would go a long way. There are then a whole host of things that we can do if the dog does become like that, but I think because you're pre-puppy stage, actually I would say, well, I wouldn't worry too much about that, because if you manage the children with the dogs and indeed manage the dog with the children as a parent, then you actually have in most cases, a successful recipe for a dog that is, can be a young dog, but it isn't becoming excessive. There are various thoughts and feelings on the use of crates. I personally recommend using a crate, especially if you can do that right from the beginning, because talking about control, is that you can put the puppy into the crate for short periods of time, and as a parent that would give you some peace of mind, especially if you have a sensible rule with the kids that they understand if he's in the crate he's to be left alone, and that could give you a bit of peace of mind. So wonderful thing getting a puppy, and good luck. Enjoy the process with a bit of forethought. There's no reason at all why it shouldn't go nicely. Thank you.
Okay, the next question. My young spaniel keeps jumping on the sofa and messing up the pillows. How can I stop him doing this without shouting at him?
Okay, well, I'll answer that question. Just as a little interim, if you would be kind enough to like and share the video, folks, that would be a great help for Petplan at the Puppy Centre, and also will allow others to discover this information. So back to the spaniel on the sofa, messing up the cushions. I don't know. The cushions are obviously what the pup is finding so exciting. Getting up, there comes that sort of critical age where the puppy realises that maybe via a step, or whether even it's just big enough, it can have a little bit of a run and a dive, and it realises at that sort of 10-week age that it can actually make the sofa. And then, of course, you've got a whole new world of issues to address. You can only address it if you're present. So yet again, I'm going to bring in the word supervision. I'm not anti dogs coming on sofas. My little border terrier, far from a pup, she's 13 now, but you could say puppy sized. She's always, from an early age, come up onto the sofa, but it's how we do it. And I would always ask the dog to sit. Let's assume I'm sitting on the sofa. The dog would come up to me. If it throws itself onto the sofa, hopefully I would try and see it coming and just put a blocking hand out. So we're not doing any, forceful pushing back, but a blocking hand can be perfectly effective at you just saying no, or you could use the word off. Okay, that off command is a good one, because lots of people will say get down or down, which the dog could understand, but later on it's likely, if you do some obedience with that dog, that you could be teaching the down or the lie down separately. So using the word off, which simply means get off, is a good simple command. And I would then ignore the dog just briefly, because we're trying to deter, as you are in your position, the dog thinking that it's fair game, it's the home and it can do whatever it likes. You can see the sofa, or you could take the sofa issue as a little bit like the thin end of the wedge for bigger problems that could come along if you don't address your basic level of dog control and what it does and doesn't have access to. So whilst in itself it's an important issue, it could be said that if that's allowed to continue, it could almost be symptomatic of your dog doing other things. You know, we want to develop, I'm sure you would agree, a calm, polite dog that's still fun, that still has a puppyhood, and you enjoy that with the dog, and the dog enjoys your company, but you don't just let the dog do whatever it likes. So block any jumping up with an off. You might just keep an eye on the dog, because some persistent ones will try again, especially if they've already had some fun doing this. So there'll be some blocking to be had initially. Then once the dog is sitting calmly, either a few minutes later or on another occasion, you could then say, come on then, up you come. All right, now young dogs may even need some assistance to come up. But the whole idea is not that dogs are not allowed on sofas. But by the way, if you have a no sofa rule in your home, that's fine. It's your home, as long as the dog understands the rules. But most people do allow dogs on sofas, and if the dog behaves nicely on the sofa, it can be an enjoyable way or a nice way to enjoy your dog, okay? But let's have some sensible rules around it. So they can come up, but only when you invite them up on your terms, and interestingly, the dog should also understand the getting off process as well, and that the dog should be, and there's no reason why not if you do this from an early age, but that the dog should be getting off without any grumbling or complaining, or maybe sort of sinking into the sofa thinking, no, I'm okay here. So once you say okay to the dog, then I beg your pardon, once you say to your dog, okay, off, then with a young dog, I would lift the dog off. And as the dog gets a bit older, they could be getting off under their own steam. Do be careful with dogs, young dogs especially. I wouldn't normally think about this if we were talking adult dogs, but with puppies, any jumping off from a height, even if they're brave and they seem quite capable, is not ideal, because we don't want this sort of overrunning of the wrists as dogs effectively land with a lot of their weight on the front wrists. So lifting your dog down would be a better way. Okay, so it's such an interesting subject, sofas, because it can almost be the root of other problems as well. And by that, just to quickly repeat the point I already made, it's access to privileged locations. That is okay, but you should also have control of it, and that your dog isn't, in an ideal world, taking liberties and just doing what it likes. Many people and dogs do get along perfectly well without having very good rules, if you like, around the sofa. But remember, we're in a period of prevention rather than cure. So I hope that helps. Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Okay. I was thinking of using a crate to train my new puppy. How would you advise going about this?
Okay, good. Thank you for that. The crate is always a good question. I've touched on it a couple of times already this afternoon. The way your question was worded suggests that you've yet to get your puppy. So it's always, it's even better still if we can have thoughts about how you're going to bring your puppy into the home and how you're going to start from the beginning. Much, much easier to get an 8-week-old puppy, best age to get a puppy, by the way, into a crate from day one than it is to, say, get to 10 or 12 weeks and think I need to introduce my puppy to a crate because he's not getting the toilet training at night, or he's being destructive at other times of the day, just to give a couple of examples. So bringing your puppy home, giving the, I mean, I'm thinking right within the first hour or two, letting your puppy, assuming you have garden space, scamper around in the garden, do its business, feed the puppy. And then that puppy will want to crash and sleep. Okay, that's when that puppy goes into the crate. Okay, now I would sit nearby, I would put the puppy in, I would try my hand at shutting the door, especially with a very, very young dog that is utterly exhausted, because they will just sort of give in to it. So what will actually happen is that your puppy will fall asleep there, most likely, and then when he or she wakes up, it will have you very nearby, and you can take the dog out immediately into the garden for a toilet break. But when it wakes up, it will see that it is enveloped in a crate. Okay, make sure the crate is a good size for the dog. Crate use does need to have care and attention, so that we're not thinking, well, I'm going to go out for a couple of hours in the day. It's different at night, but that daytime use I would make very short to begin with, but use it. Lots of people have crates for their puppies, and then they end up letting the puppy sleep in a corner near the radiator in the lounge, or on a bed in the lounge. Well, in theory, nothing wrong with that, but what we want to do is capitalise on sleeping times, and always bring the dog or place the dog into the crate to show the pup right from day one that this is its sleeping space, and we can make that warm and dry and comfortable. We can feed the puppy in the crate as well. We can play in and around the crate space with the puppy. It is building up time in the crate with your puppy does need to be an organic process, and you'll just need to sort of go with the flow a bit. But yes, having a crate from day one is perfect. Using it from day one is also ideal. Can I just interrupt and say that I made earlier in the year some really nice short videos with Petplan. If you go to youtube.com/Petplan, they have a playlist there of, I think it's called puppy training or pet training, and there's about 10 or 12 videos with me with a host of puppies. Okay, and we covered subjects like how to introduce a crate, but all the others as well, how to introduce the sit, the down, the stay, the recall, toilet training. So there's a really nice little playlist of videos there, so go along and have a look at those, and they will help elaborate a little bit more on what I'm giving you today. Thank you. Okay, so unless there are any other questions, I think we'll bring it to an end. But I have to say, there is one thing that is extremely important with puppies, and that is the subject of socialisation. The average age of dogs I see is about 2 years of age, and most of those issues relate to how the dog, still a young dog, relates to other dogs and other people. And those problems stem back into what we could broadly call a lack of socialisation. Now, naturally, if you take on a slightly older dog or a rescue dog, all of that time is, I understand, beyond your immediate control, and that your future efforts and existing efforts will be about making up for that lost ground. But again, if you're a puppy owner or contemplating getting a puppy, aside from getting your puppy from a good resource, so that you're not buying on the internet, that you are making sure that you see the parents, especially the mother with the puppies, and that you do your prior research and make sure you're getting a good dog. The rest then is about taking that dog ideally at 8 weeks of age. Many people take their puppies away from the litter, and I always realise there are different points of view on this, but the general consensus is that you take your puppy at 8 weeks of age. A puppy of that age will be weaned and ready to come home with you. That also gives you from 8 to 16 weeks, which 16 weeks being the end of the socialisation period. It's not a door that closes completely, but it does begin to come to an end. It gives you those 8 weeks, 2 months of you to think about all the different things that you could be doing with your puppy that help it fit in with society at large and maybe your particular lifestyle. So if you have particular things you like to do, going away in the caravan, or you have a narrow boat, or anything that's a little bit different, your 8-week-old plus puppy will be so much more fit and ready and able to take on board these experiences really without questioning them, provided they're safe and well managed throughout. So socialisation is a big subject, so I won't expand on it much more, other than to say, think about how you're obtaining your puppy, obtaining it at the right age, and thinking then about, and even working out in advance of you getting your puppy, a solid plan of socialisation so that your puppy can cope with all animals by and large, all people in pretty much all circumstances, and you can do that just by getting out, but getting out on a daily basis. Okay, so once again, thank you all very much for listening to this behaviour related puppy session with Petplan, and I look forward to speaking with you all again in the very near future. Have a great evening.